Like it's a common rule, oh, if you're not 10% body fat, you won't see your abs. Like that's bullshit. When you start actually getting to these, like higher levels of body composition, I guess not really higher level, just more muscle on your frame, the more you're going to see details when What's up guys, Derek, moreplaysmartaids.com. Today we're going to be talking about how bodybuilders have visible abs year round. So this is a common question I get asked, is how do they remain lean even if they eat cheat food all the time and they eat copious amounts of food, including, garbage processed stuff, and they still remain, visible abs year round. This is what you have to understand with that. It's not, it's not the trend, it's not the HGH, it's not the insulin. It's not that their genetics are so superior. Well, actually it is, their genetics are so superior, but let me get to that. Basically, what a lot of people overlook is the fact that when you're a skinny rail with no muscle, your abs are a muscle too, just like any other body part. So the more you build it up, the more it is going to protrude out from the film of water and fat that is covering it. So when you get, this is why you could have a kid who's just literally skin and bones, but he doesn't have a developed looking six pack. Like he doesn't have deep ab cuts. It's just kind of like, like skinny fat. And this is like, this kid barely has any fat on his frame, and yet he doesn't have visible abs. And you have bodybuilders who are like, have moon faces, and they're like, their face looks fat, but they still have visible abs year round despite eating fucking pizza every night. The reason is because they built up their foundation of muscle to the point where you can see it. You can see the veins being pushed to the surface. You can see the abs, protruding out, even though there's a layer of fat and water covering it. And the more muscle you gain, the more apparent this is. And this is why you have guys who have visible abs despite being like 14% body fat. Like it's a common rule, oh, if you're not 10% body fat, you won't see your abs. Like that's bullshit. When you start actually getting to these, like higher levels of body composition, I guess not really higher level, just more muscle on your frame, the more you're going to see details when you would otherwise not see them. Like for me, for example, this bicep vein just chilling here, when I was a rail and I had less body fat than I have now actually, or even when I was building my physique and I had less body fat than I have now at times, the vein wasn't as prominent. And the reason is, partly because I built this amount of muscle that's like pushing everything to the surface. And, the visible abs, you have guys who are 300 pounds in the off season, their faces look like fucking cannonballs, but yet they still have a visible outline of their abs. It's not the prettiest looking six pack, but it's a six pack nonetheless. And you have a kid who's 140 and still doesn't have abs, even though he's like super skinny, to the objectively. And it's literally just because the guy hasn't built his muscle. In addition to that, bodybuilders have such fast metabolisms by building up a foundation of muscle. What you have to understand is metabolically active tissue. I don't even know if that's the right word to describe it, but tissue that actually utilizes energy as a substrate for its performance. When you have fat sitting on your body, it doesn't really need a substantial amount of nourishment. When you have muscle on your frame though, it eats up calories like even when you're sitting there. So your resting metabolic rate is significantly higher the more muscle you have. So like just sitting there, not doing anything as a bodybuilder who's 240 lean versus a bodybuilder who's 200 lean, you're expending more energy to fuel that tissue than you would have if you had 40 pounds less muscle, even if you had a proportionally less amount of fat, just because you have more bodily fucking tissue that demands nutrients to function. It also makes you hungrier though. So it's not like you get away with it scot-free where you can just, be shredded year round and eat like a ton of food. You also are more hungry because your body's demanding more nourishment to fuel that tissue, like I said. But with bodybuilders, they're eating so much food often that objectively it's like, you could have a guy in his off season, he's like in the 5,000s for calories. He does like a calorie drop to like 4,800 and he starts losing fat, even though you might have to start your cut at like 2,700 because you don't have nearly as much muscle as him and you haven't primed your metabolism like this guy has with the amount of muscle he's packed onto his frame over, several off seasons of bulking and cutting and bulking and, or, whatever kind of method he has of maybe he just, slowly gained the entire time. But either way, he's reached a point where he's built his body up to utilize this fuel more than the average person because he has all this tissue that demands it and because he's revved his metabolism up over the years of accruing all this new muscle mass that demands the nourishment. So without sounding redundant, basically It's not like you take some special drug and then you just like peel everything off, or you need to be on tren year round, or the GH is like the magical fat burner, because it's really not. At the end of the day, it has to do with how much muscle is on your frame and how much do you eat, and what is your, energy expenditure as well, obviously, and like your exercise routine. But in general, the guys who stay lean, they're not necessarily leaner proportionally sometimes. It's just they have so much more muscle. You can see it through all this gunk sitting on them. When I say gunk, I just mean like fat. So you can see everything easier because there's so much of it. So, the muscle is developed and it's showing easier. In addition to that, the metabolism of these guys is so high because they have so much metabolically active tissue that's just burning through calories. And yeah, that's honestly what it boils down to. None of these guys are abusing, Clen, T3, GH in the off season to stay lean. It doesn't work like that. Like, a lot of delusional people will think, oh, like, bodybuilders, they always have visible abs in the off season, so they must be doing some sort of, drug stack in order to stay lean, doing fasted cardio with like a shot of GH beforehand, using Humalog to intentionally drop their blood sugar, and using Yohimbine and fucking this and fucking that. It's like, no, dude, they just have a lot of muscle and you can see it, and they have a lot of metabolically active muscle. That's all metabolically active, but it's all just burning through calories. So it's very easy for them to do a small drop, what appears objectively to be a shit ton amount of food, and start dropping the weight like crazy. Despite another guy who's, 50 pounds less muscle might have to drop to 2,600 calories to get the same amount of fat loss started as a 260 pound guy might, dropping down to, 4,500 calories or something like that. It all depends on the personal situation of the guy, how much muscle he's built, what he's been eating up to now, and how he's primed his body in his off season. But at the end of the day, it comes down to how much muscle you have on your frame relative to your calorie expenditure and intake. So it is still just calories in, calories out at the end of the day. The way you perceive it is just different because you're not used to. Most people can't wrap their heads around the fact that a metabolism can burn through this amount of calories. And there's just like this dumb rule that's permeated through the bodybuilding industry that if you're not 10% body fat, it's like physically impossible to see abs, which is just not the case at all. Like, you see, some guys are like 15% plus with visible abs. It's just not the prettiest looking abs, and they're not deep, but you can still see them. Even when they're not flexing, they're just standing there. You can see the outline of them just because they have so much muscle on them, or they have such a developed core that it's just, you can see it even when they're, bulked up. And that's just how it is. So, at the end of the day, don't read too much into it. Don't abuse drugs thinking you need it to stay lean in the off season like these guys. All you need to do is focus on building as much muscle as possible, and then the metabolism will follow. So take from that what you will. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. If you are interested in testosterone replacement therapy, TRT, or HRT in general, there's a lot of different treatment options. You can check out my HRT clinic. Link in the description below. Coupon code MPMD50 will save you $50 off your first treatment. If anything is warranted to optimize your current health status, you basically just open up the homepage, drop a request for a consultation, and then our patient care coordinators will get in contact with you. Alternatively, you can go to our available medications page and add anything you feel you may benefit from to your wish list, which then gives our patient care coordinators some insight into what exactly you're looking for. And then from there, they can look at your blood work or pull your blood work if you don't have any existing blood work, and assess any imbalances or deficiencies you may have, and then arrange for a one-on-one with our doctors over Skype, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever's convenient for you, from the comfort of your own home, and go over your protocol for whatever may be warranted to optimize your current situation. So anything else I'm associated with too, Gorilla Mode pre-workout formulas. I developed these myself, turnkey. They're the most potent pre-workout formulas in the industry. Gorilla Mode, the stim-based pre-workout. Self-explanatory why these are better than the rest, in my opinion. Just compare the label of your current pre to mine, and you'll see why. Gorilla Mode Nitric, the stimulant-free pre-workout, and Gorilla Mind Rush, Gorilla Mind Smooth, the turnkey nootropics for cognitive enhancement, focus, mental clarity, etc. These are all things I developed throughout my university years to stay locked in and focused and knock out 16-hour productive work days. Nowadays, into my working years, to just crush sitting at a desk essentially and cranking out work and doing YouTube videos and content and whatnot. But back in my university years, this is what I used to cram for exams, prepare for business presentations, stuff like that. Honestly, anything that requires a high level of attention and focus and creativity, I feel they excel at really bringing out the best in. And anything else I'm associated with too, video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.